Today we're returning to Fenris to take a look at the wolf-mad Space Vikings in 9th edition. Let's talk Space Wolves. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, the strategy-focused 40K channel, where today we're going to do a bit of an overview of Space Wolves in 9th edition, how they're faring at the moment, talk through their core army rules and some of their strongest choices, touch on quite a few of their datasheets, and then finish up with an example list. Loads to talk about for the Sons of Russ, so let's jump straight in. First of all, Space Wolves do seem to be faring okay in tournaments and events these days. They're a fairly solid melee chapter and seem to be roughly on a par with armies such as Blood Angels and White Scars in terms of how many good placings they're seeing at events. There's definitely a lot to like about them, and it's nice that they're not directly overshadowed by any one other Space Marine melee force. The White Scars and the Blood Angels might get there a bit faster, but the Space Wolves have a ton of unique options, and often hit a bit harder once they're there. Perhaps their biggest selling point is their massive melee damage between their chapter trait, unique doctrine, and their various stratagems, and all the unique models and datasheets that you can include in the army. I believe out of the unique Space Marine chapters, they are the single chapter that has the most unique datasheets that no one else can take. It's not just a roster of special characters and a few elite slots. They've got unique dreadnoughts, their own custom version of tactical squads and devastators, some flyers and wolf units as well. Finally, in general they do tend to be fairly tough. Quite a lot of their units bear storm shields or have good saves, and are usually fairly well suited to slogging through enemy fire to beat them down in close combat. Historically, perhaps Space Wolves' main weakness has usually been reliably reaching melee. It's not like they don't have options, and certainly being able to advance and charge with wolf units isn't bad, but they just don't have army-wide inbuilt things like the White Scars advance and charge, Black Templars re-roll charges, or Blood Angels bonuses to advancing and charging. As a melee chapter, they don't have all that many buffs to shooting either, though perhaps they're a little bit less monodimensional compared with the Blood Angels, for example. Finally, they do have one major trade-off for all their unit diversity. Space Wolves can't get Apothecaries, and it is a shame to lock them out of one of the strongest Space Marine buffing characters out of the Codex. The Chief Apothecary, allowing you to resurrect a model for free each turn, does tend to make an appearance in quite a lot of Space Marine lists. If we look at their core rules, their chapter tactic Hunters Unleashed gives them +1 to hit in the first round of melee, and it also gives them army-wide heroic intervention. The hit boost is very nice. It'll usually amp up Space Marine melee by an extra +25% damage, and in particular it's really strong with Power Fists or Thunderhammers, as they generally feel the buff just a little bit more, as it's a lot more powerful to have a +1 to hit buff on a 4+ hitting unit. It certainly incentivizes you to take Fists and Hammers on your character units, as because they hit on 2s already, they won't be getting any buff from the chapter tactic, unless they get a -1 to hit from somewhere as well. The army-wide heroic intervention is also nice. It really gives Space Wolves a boost when defending objectives, and makes it far harder for enemy units just to trot up to them and try and obsec them away while not engaging them in combat. If you've parked a fighty Space Wolf unit on an objective, then it makes the opponent actually have to deal with it. I would say it's a good chapter tactic, but I still think that Space Wolves are one of the chapters that best benefit from successor chapters. It seems that competitively, quite a lot of people run the combination of Whirlwind of Rage for exploding 6s in melee, with Born Heroes giving them a +1 to hit on the charge. Between the two of these rules working together, you get on average an extra 50% damage output out for your Space Marine charging unit, compared with if you were in a non-melee chapter. Combined with the hard-hitting Space Wolf unique units, and their Savage Fury unique assault doctrine, they really can make units that just about obliterate anything they touch. There are some trade-offs to this, of course. You will lose access to the Space Wolves cast of special characters, and they do have quite a lot of options to choose from, and you won't get the automatic heroic intervention on objectives, though you can somewhat mitigate the heroic intervention thing, as you still have access to the counter-charge stratagem, which I believe you can still use on any unit for 1 CP. It means that you can still make your most important heroic intervention each turn, while double dipping on the damage buffs. Their unique combat doctrine is Savage Fury, the assault doctrine that gives them extra hits on 6s, and Space Wolves don't have to pay quite as much to access it earlier either, as they can access it for just 1 command point in the fight phase. Those extra hits on 6s will also be another 25% damage increase, and a bit better than that on Thunderhammers and Power Fists. These buffs really add up quite well. Say for example if you were playing a Space Wolves successor chapter, and you were in the Savage Fury doctrine, then typically most of your units are going to be hitting at an extra 75% increase in their damage, and anything with Power Fists or Thunderhammers is typically going to be double damage compared with what it would be otherwise. Moving on, here are a few of my favourite Warlord traits, relics and psychic powers. The Warlord traits all have an innate buff and a Saga ability, the Saga one giving them a helpful aura if they achieve one certain action. Largely, I think they're just a little bit on the weak side. Having to do the action before you get the second buff is kind of annoying and can be unreliable. Out of the Space Wolves ones, I think the strongest is the Saga of the Hunter. It's really quite nice for a fighty character in general. You get +1 to advance and charge, and you can also fall back and charge as well, so your character isn't just going to get pinned in combat with something durable. This becomes even better though if you can make a charge, as it becomes an aura to allow everyone nearby to advance and charge. Could be really handy on Jump Pack Wolfguard or Wolfguard Terminators, as well as the Warlord themselves. Between this and the innate buff, they'll be able to go hurtling across the table like their White Scars and Blood Angels combined. Otherwise though, perhaps the next picks I'd go for are things like the Rites of War or the Imperium Sword from the core codex, Rites of War for that helpful obsec, and Imperium Sword for just yet more melee damage. Relics wise, perhaps the single strongest might be the Armour of Russ, a 2+ save, a 4+ invul, and most importantly a Fight's Last ability. It's really handy for preventing the opponent interrupting with counter-offensive, and can even just mess around them if they're charging into you. That on its own would probably be good enough to justify a relic, but getting a 2+ armor save and a 4+ invul just makes it even better. You can also make a really fighty Wolf Lord with a couple of Frost Claws. Lightning Claws with +1 strength and +1 damage are just going to blend near enough anything. And the Wolfram Stone can give you a really helpful advance and charge ability, and a once per game buff to Savage Fury, making it go off on a 5+. Also, while it might not be the most competitive pick out of any of them, I do really quite like the Mountain Breaker Helm as well. After fighting, your character gets to deal D3 mortal wounds on the roll of a 2+, and it's quite nice that it's so reliable pretty much every time they fight. Will certainly make an impact whether you're against heavies or hordes. Otherwise, the Benediction of Fury, Chaplain Relic, and the Teeth of Terror are both decent combat options from the core codex, and are rarely going to be a bad choice for a melee army. Finally, the Space Wolves Psychic phase is really quite strong. The Tempestor's Discipline has almost every spell be really quite usable, and Rune Priest Librarians make quite a lot of appearances in competitive Space Wolf lists. There's Murderous Hurricane for a Fight Last ability and potentially denying Overwatch, Stormcaller, which gives everyone nearby light cover, really handy for covering your advance, Instincts Awoken for another way to get the early assault doctrine, and if you already have Savage Fury active, then you can get extra AP on 6s as well, Living Lightning for a few extra nice mortal wounds, and one that gives a -1 to hit debuff. It's a really good discipline indeed. I think that Murderous Hurricane, Stormcaller, and Instincts Awoken are all really good value. Moving on, the Space Wolves also have a decent amount of useful stratagems. You can outflank a unit for 1 CP, often going to be far more efficient than Strategic Reserve. There's the 1 command point countercharge, which gives you a 1 command point 6-inch heroic intervention, and it's free on characters too. That means that realistically, your opponent is going to have to stay greater than 6 inches away from all of your Space Wolf melee units at all times, unless they want to risk a surprise melee. 2 command point Cloaked by the Storm combos really well with Stormcaller. It means that your Rune Priest could both give an aura of light cover and also -1 to hit, and that's really going to make your advancing Space Wolf units hard to shift. Keen Senses can allow you to ignore any shooting hit roll modifiers, or any charge roll modifiers if that's relevant. A nice simple one for keeping heavy weapons accurate on the move, maybe best used on long fangs perhaps. And a nice Runic Wards one, which means that you can have a chance of denying the Witch within 12 inches on any unit. Obviously you're not guaranteed to be able to deny the power, but often the difference between whether or not one key psychic power goes off could be absolutely key to the game. Finally, there's a pair of really strong melee buffs. Savage Strike will give you +1 to wound, though it does cost 2 CP on bigger units, so maybe 1 to use on smaller ones. Not bad at all to have another crazy power buff on units that are going to be quite stacked with buffs already. And there's that 1 command point Bestial Nature one, the one that gives you the early assault doctrine. Both extra AP and exploding 6s is really good value if you don't already have it. There's a lot of good stuff here, and it really does incentivize Space Wolf players to make lists with single detachments to have the maximum amount of CP. Moving on, let's talk about a few of the unique datasheets, and we'll start out with some of the best units in the codex, the elite melee choices of the Space Wolves. I'd argue that perhaps Wolfguard and Wolfguard Terminators are some of the strongest datasheets in the whole codex, Wolfguard in particular being particularly strong with jump packs and storm shields, plus either lightning claws or power fists or hammers. For Vanguard veterans, it has seemed that the internet settled on the Storm Shield and Lightning Claw as the strongest way to field Vanguard vets. Games Workshop slightly nerfed the combo in the latest chapter approved, putting them up 2 points per model, but it was interesting to see that the Space Wolves Wolfguard didn't take that similar nerf. It means they're basically sitting now with the cheapest Lightning Claw Storm Shield jump pack veterans out of any chapter. They're a really fun and flexible unit though, plenty of other fun builds to try out, and certainly mixing in a few Power Fists or Thunder Hammers for a bit more dedicated anti-tank is no bad thing in Space Wolves. Wolfguard Terminators also have really flexible loadouts, and in particular the thing I like most about them is their ability to combine Storm Shields with either Lightning Claws, Chain Fists or Storm Bolters. It means they can be ridiculously durable with a 2+ save with +1 to save, a 4+ invul, and they can still cost really cheap as well. It's just 33 points for that crazy amount of durability on a Wolfguard with a Lightning Claw and Storm Shield, and he'll still pack a fair punch in combat too. They seem like a bit more of an efficient unit with Chain Fists over Thunder Hammers, and you can also make some weird non-melee Terminators with Storm Shields and Storm Bolters for an insanely durable unit with a little bit of firepower. Otherwise, Space Wolves also have the Thunderwolf Cavalry and the Wolfen. They're slightly more quirky, unique melee units. I'd say the Thunderwolves in particular do remain strong. I'd always take Storm Shields, and then maybe mix in either Lightning Claws or Hammers, and they have a good threat range being able to advance and charge. Being cavalry is a bit of a weakness to them. It does mean that they don't interact with terrain that well. For Wolfen, one of the strongest units out of 8th edition, they're not looking quite as hot as they used to. They're really destructive, but are relatively easy to kill comparatively. The Storm Shield dropping down to a 4+ invul hurt them quite a bit, and I'm not sure they're quite on the same level as the Wolfguard and the Terminators at the moment. The Space Wolf Dreadnoughts are also pretty decent. I have a particular liking for Bjorn the Fell-Handed. I just think he's really quite efficient all round. He's got a really tough stat line and special rules, incredibly strong melee, a little bit of ranged firepower with his Las Cannon or Hellfrost, all kept safe by character protection, and then he even gives a reroll aura that you can make even better with Wisdom of the Ancients if you need reroll ones to hit and wound. I think he's rarely going to be a bad choice slogging up the centre of the board screened by something, and posing a massive threat in the midfield. I'd say very similar about Murderfang as well, who is one of the strongest dreadnoughts in terms of just dealing raw massive melee damage. Not quite as durable as Bjorn, so most certainly would need screening. But with those Murder Claws doing a crazy 8 attacks at weapon skill 2+, strength 12, AP -3 and damage 3, and then re-rolling all wound rolls, there's almost nothing that wants to have a round in combat with Murderfang. She'll cut through most vehicles and infantry in a single round of combat. Finally, there's also the Wolfen Dreadnought and the unique options for the Venerable. Another quite interesting option. I'd usually want to take the Blizzard Shield for that nice 4+ invul. Between that and Duty Eternal and being quite cheap, it's quite nice as a fairly throwaway threat that you can put down the centre of the table and not worry too much if your opponent tries to shoot. Space Wolves have an absolute ton of special characters, and I don't really have enough time to go through all of them in the video here, but out of them these are my favourites at the moment. Nyar Stormcaller is a really tanky rune priest with good casting and denials. Wolfguard battle leaders on Thunderwolves and things can be a good alternative to standard Wolf Lords. In particular, they work quite well with the armour of Russ if you don't have a Storm Shield. Ragnar Blackmane does all you'd want in a fighty Primaris character, a big 10 attacks at strength 6, AP -4 and damage 2, plus he also boosts charges for nearby units. Logan Grimnar has decent melee damage, auto passes morale for nearby units, and gives one unit a full reroll buff each turn. And Thunderwolf characters can be a decent alternative to a bike-mounted character, a few extra attacks, increased durability, and an all-important advance and charge. There's plenty of others, though these are currently my favourites. Otherwise, there's a few more datasheets that the Space Wolves have access to that no one else does. Unique troops in Bloodclaws and Grey Hunters. Bloodclaws in particular are quite an interesting alternative to Assault Intercessors, being a little bit cheaper but still having essentially the same attacks. Skyclaws are like assault squads that you might actually consider taking. Their Berserk Charge rule actually allows them to compete with standard chainsaw armed Wolfguard, though still I think that I'd rather have these Storm Shield and Lightning Claw options that the Wolfguard give. Longfangs allow you to take a Wolfguard battle leader in a Devastator squad, and also they're quite nice for their Ignores Modifier strat. And there's the Hounds of Morkai, the unique Reaver unit, that's going to do fairly well against any Psychers, particularly if you're playing Grey Knights or Thousand Suns, but not really all that great otherwise. The Wolf units are something that other Space Marine chapters don't get. Cheap Cyber Wolves or Fenrisian Wolves, and they can be quite nice for just screening out enemies, or doing quite easy objectives such as jumping into table quarters for engage on all fronts. Quite nice to have a fast sacrificial unit option. The nearest standard Space Marines have are Servitors. Finally, we come to the Stormwolf and the Stormfang, the unique flyers. The Stormfang in particular was really efficient at the start of 9th edition, but unfortunately it took a hefty nerf since. At the moment I just think that they're far too overcosted for their durability. and not really worth bothering with aside from just fun or more casual games. Otherwise, in terms of non-unique datasheets, Space Wolves will work very well with just about any unit that has any melee in Codex Space Marines, and they're certainly fine with any of the more standard shooting options that are strong in virtually any chapter. The Primaris Chaplain on Bike is a good deliverer of efficient buffs, can also be a way that you can get +1 to wound in combat, or help deliver the wolves into melee with +2 to charge. Most of the troops choices certainly don't mind having a bit more melee bite either. Infiltrators and Incursors are great for objectives, and Assault Intercessors are particularly interesting in Space Wolves, a flurry of very accurate attacks, and any Thunderhammers or Power Fists have even more added value. Blade Guard Veterans are solid as well, maybe slightly struggling to compete with the Wolfguard Terminators and Wolfguard Jump Packs, but a good all-round blending unit. And of course there's any of the standard strong Space Marine firepower, Redemptor Dreadnoughts or the dreaded Twin Volkite Contemptor. Both of those could potentially be quite nice next to a Tempestus Psyker for giving them cover as well. Eradicators and Attack Bikes for some melter delivery, and Eliminators at 25 points put out some really solid sniper fire on a body that isn't much more expensive than the standard troops. Finally, I thought we'd just round up by looking at one winning Space Wolves tournament list, one that was written by a Mr. Scott Rumpel, who according to Best Coast Pairings came first at Salty Alliance GT with this. The list is run as a single Space Wolves successor battalion with that powerful melee combination of Born Heroes and Whirlwind of Rage, so trading out the heroic intervention for extra melee damage, and he can still heroically intervene with that stratagem. There's 5 big really threatening units in the list, 2 units of 5 Wolfguard Terminators, and then 3 units of the Wolfguard with jump packs. Pretty much all of them are armed with Storm Shield and Lightning Claw, except for 1 unit of the Wolfguard jump packs, which take 4 Thunderhammers instead. That unit will most certainly pack a punch against hard targets. They're led into battle with a Chapter Master with a jump pack, who has 2 Lightning Claws with the Frost Claw upgrade, and also the Rights of War Warlord trait that will give him and the fighter units OBSEC. There's also a Librarian in Phobos armor to support, who can set up a little bit further forward if needed. He can debuff with Murderous Hurricane for fighting last, and use Instincts Awoken to grant Savage Fury early on one of the units. Finally, there's a Primaris Bike Chaplain, who uses the Exaltation of Rage and Canticle of Hate, and he's really quite stacked with upgrades. He's a Master of Sanctity with the Wise Orator trait for 2 litanies and being able to cast them on a 2+. He has the Armor of Russ for a 2+ armor save and making an enemy fight last, and he's also upgraded with the Saga of the Hunter, +1 to advance and charge, and after he has made a successful charge roll, he'll be able to zoom across the battlefield, advancing a huge 20 inches and charging after that. There's then 3 units of troops for holding down objectives, a unit of Infiltrators and Incursors to hold the midfield and screen deep strike, a unit of 5 Intercessors with auto bolt rifles, who I suspect might be sitting on a home field objective, a nice firepower Twin Volkite Contemptor Dreadnought, good generalist firepower and strong in just about every Space Marine list, and then a drop pod full of Longfangs with multi-melters, potentially for a very nasty first turn strike, and of course they can ignore the modifier for moving and shooting with that 1 CP stratagem. There's then a single Cyber Wolf, presumably for just random objectives and getting in the way, and an Invader ATV with an Onslaught Gatling cannon, again I suspect mainly used as a fast and tough objective holder. It's obviously a successful list and has been commanded very well, owing to its first place finish, and I must say I really quite like the design of it as well. In particular, having the 5 heavy hitting elite units really seems like you're making good use of some of the strongest units in the Space Wolf army. So I hope you've enjoyed a bit of a roundup of Space Wolves in 9th edition. Definitely a fun and solid chapter to play, with some crazily brutal close combat damage. If there's anything else that I've missed or you think is important, then I'm certainly happy to hear any advice from any Longfangs down in the comments, so feel free to share your wisdom. If you've enjoyed the video, then feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics, where I'll most certainly keep the regular 40k videos coming, with new content coming out near enough every day. If you've enjoyed the videos recently, then I would just like to mention that Auspex Tactics does have a Patreon page, which you can find down in the video description below. Making all these videos does take a fair amount of time, and if you are enjoying regularly, any support is massively appreciated. Channel patrons do get a fair few advantages, seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things come next for the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with a chance to win some big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good, or you'd just like to help support, then the link is down in the video description. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.